First, the deontological argument. It goes like this. Those who are affected by technological decisions, whether the effects are good or bad, should have some say over what affects them. To some degree, this simply updates the Kantian concept of moral autonomy for a technoscientific context. As human beings, we're moral agents whose agency is abridged when decisions that affect our lives are made heteronomously by others, including scientists and engineers, or by the products in our decisions are influenced, our lives are influenced by the products, processes, and systems that they design, construct, or operate. In the special area of biomedical research, the well-established principle of requiring the free and informed consent from human subjects is a regional application of Kantian deontology that also exemplifies democratic concerns. But the say that citizens in general should be able to exercise across technoscientific affairs need not be veto power on the basis of this argument, after the manner of informed consent in biomedicine. Perhaps it's better encapsulated in a slogan developed by Steve Goldman some years ago: no innovation without representation. Second argument is a consequentialist argument. The most common consequentialist argument is simply that of utilitarianism. Public participation in scientific and technological decision making increases the happiness of all the public. There's some good evidence that that's the case, empirical evidence that that's the case. There's a good deal of hedonic psychology, happiness research going on, showing that people who participate in the world in which they live in one form or another, they don't, again, have to exercise primary control, but if they feel like they have some power, some influence, that they're happier. So you can make a consequentialist argument that people are happier if they participate in where their money is going. In a more positive vein, public participation has been argued to produce actually better outcomes. Like the public demand argument, this stresses the need to face the reality of citizen veto power in order to get something done. But here the idea is not just getting something done faster and cheaper, as it were, but better. Involving an affected public and drawing on local knowledge can often make for better products and thus, again, more happiness. A further consequentialist argument related here is an argument from what I call technoscientific realism. Experts simply cannot escape non-expert influence. There will either be corporate influence or influence from some other kind. Influence is pervasive, whether technoscientific experts like it or not. Indeed, psychological studies have confirmed that experts inevitably tend to promote their own self-interests, often at the expense of those of the public, or promote the interests of their employers. Technoscientific decision-making is never neutral or objective, despite what risk analysts try to say. Of course, the technoscientific establishment can try to minimize such influence, but another and complementary strategy would simply be to make whatever in fact exists at least clear and open, and to turn influence into a well-articulated participation. Transparency is closely allied to this notion of participation. Third, the final justification for democratic participation in technoscientific decision-making involves a virtue ethics argument. Only from participation will citizens be able to learn and become more intelligent about their political and economic support of technology, as well as about the real risk and benefit complexities of technical action. With roots in the educational theory and social philosophy of Dewey, I've been talking about Dewey in class a lot. A related and perhaps richer version of this argument stresses the processes of societal learning and emerging intelligence for dealing with the complexities of technoscientific life. By means of such arguments and their relations, including many of those associated with more specialized fields, activists and scholars in the STS studies field have promoted the building of bridges between the scientific pursuit of knowledge, of nature, and democratic efforts to articulate. So that's all my attempt to acknowledge some good things that have been going on and to contribute in a very modest way, very marginal way, by making this argument. Now, impossibilities. Under conditions associated with modernity, philosophy has found itself restricted to clarifying logical or conceptual difficulties in science first handmade, defending democracy, second handmade, and providing guidelines for relations between scientific expertise and democratic decision-making, third handmade. These are not trivial activities and achievements. From conceptual clarity in science, increased appreciation of complexities in democracy, and contributions to democratic science and technology policy are not without significance. Nevertheless, is it unreasonable to long for something more? The argument here is that there exists what may be termed impossible opportunities that come into focus, especially with regard to the issue of public science, that's publicly funded science, in a liberal democracy. The possibility is that, contrary to modern assumptions, philosophy might have the potential to contribute a knowledge of both nature, like science claims to do, and the good, like democracy claims to do, that goes beyond what is available through philosophy of science and democratic theory, and that this philosophical knowledge can influence for the better both science and liberal democracy. This is a difficult argument to make. It's certainly not one that I'm going to fully develop here. I'm sort of outlining it here by appealing to another philosopher whose work I try to develop, and that's the work of Albert Boardman. In this spirit, I'm going to consider an emerging philosophical argument that has been made by our colleague, Albert Boardman at the University of Montana. Boardman's work contributes to an emerging philosophical reflection on engineering and technological design, the nature and good of artifacts. I apologize to the students who are in my class that some of this they've already heard. We ended with Boardman in class. The central concept in Boardman's philosophy of technology is the device paradigm as contrasted with focal things and practices. According to Boardman, contemporary life has been and is structured in a new way as technological devices permeate the culture. One telling example concerns heat. Household heating was once centered in the hearth, which served both comfort and cooking, but required care. Wood had to be harvested, split, and brought into the house. The fire had to be tended. Such activities called forth skills and created familial divisions of labor. The hearth itself was also a particular artifact, a thing of stone, eventually cast iron, around which the family gathered for warmth, for the preparation and sharing of a meal, or perhaps just to talk over the experiences of the day. This romantic description must no doubt be complemented by the acknowledgement of difficulties arising from shortages of wood and quarrels concerning the distribution of chores within the family. Today, few houses in the developed world have hearths or wood stoves. People in the advanced techno-scientific world have been disburdened from the tasks of heating through the gradual creation of central heating system. A device, not a thing, which recedes into the quotidian background. People simply become consumers of a commodity inconspicuously provided by such a device. Warmth, heat. There's no hassle, no aroma of burning wood, no conspicuous artifact occupying a place, taking up space in the room, and no central gathering point either. Boardman's homey example aims to disclose how the device paradigm alters the character of culture in its ambit. The disburdenment it brings into the human world tends to undermine both care and well-being. Work, transformed by devices, often loses the pleasures of skilled making, or finds these pleasures taken away from the body and resituated in some virtual space, mainly design on a computer screen. The job becomes merely a means for earning money by sitting at a computer screen. Leisure declines in character as well, insofar as it's filled with excessive consumption and entertainment. One may summarize Boardman's analysis of the character of contemporary life by describing it as having become, through the paradigm of device technology, unfocused, disintegrated. His response is thus to propose the reintroduction of anti-device focal things and practices. What techno-scientific culture lacks in its material richness is physically or practically centered depth. Techno-scientific disburdenment alone is unable to yield a deep or meaningful life. At most, technology can free people to enjoy things and practices in an old-fashioned sense. Indeed, for Boardman, it is, I quote, "when we allow ourselves to be guided by focal things, matters of ultimate concern that are other and greater than ourselves, that the good life comes to the fore in poetic discourse."